Hey guys, welcome back to the Live Well podcast. I am so excited because as you can tell, we are now recording on YouTube as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to click subscribe. And if you're listening on the podcast and you love video version, definitely go over and head over to the YouTube channel to watch it on video too. Because we also have a very special guest. I've gotten my fiance to come on. He's been on the show before, but he's never been on camera. So welcome, babe. How you feeling?
Fantastic. Excited to be here.
We're pushing you out of your comfort zone.
That's for sure.
So today we're diving obviously into nervous system because we know that I'm the nervous system queen, and really kind of like what blocks people from having a safe nervous system. We're going to dive into kind of like the myths and really debunk some of the things that are on the internet that I see that are just not true. So the reason people have like a lack of safety in their nervous system is often because they are placing their safety in something outside of you, right? So a lot of people are running around in a dysregulated state. They are operating kind of in this fight or flight. But what a lot of people don't realize is that they're operating in fight or flight pretty much 24/7. It's become their normal state. We've actually gotten to a point where we've normalized dysregulation, and people aren't even realizing the fact that they're living in this chronic state of stress, this chronic state of anxiety. So what a lot of people don't realize is that by placing the safety outside of themselves and living in this dysregulated state, they're always feeling stressed. They're feeling stressed with money. They're feeling stressed in their businesses. They're operating in this like chronic state where they're unable to really grow, they're unable to expand, and this really kind of blocks them from going to the next level. A lot of the time, what people are doing is instead of trying to create safety first, they're trying to slap something on top of it to make them feel better, kind of like a Band-Aid or putting like frosting on a bad tasting cake. So what you actually have to do first is you have to look at what is preventing safety in your nervous system, right? What is the thing that is embedded that is making you react to this versus just trying to bypass it? And so a lot of people get stuck in trying to do all of these techniques, all of these tools to manage their system, instead of getting to the root cause in the brain of why their system is unsafe to begin with. And so this is where you see kind of a lot of the modalities or tools people try to use to regulate. But what happens is they end up spending so much time of their day trying to regulate. They end up spending all this time doing practices just to feel regulated, just to feel fine, instead of existing as someone who is regulated. So you see things like somatic workouts, EFT tapping, putting your face in like ice water. And these things aren't inherently bad. But what happens is you keep needing them, right? Do you notice how you'll put your face in ice water, you feel good for 5 minutes, but the next time there's a trigger, the next time something happens, it's like, oh shit, we're triggered again. All right, face in ice water. Let me tap it away. Like, let me go through this modality. And for me, I'm just like, well, why don't we just get to the root and allow you to become someone who is regulated so that you don't need these practices? Because at the end of the day, dunking your face in ice water is not why you're unsafe, right? You're unsafe because you feel abandoned, neglected. There's like a lack of safety. It's not because you have a deficiency of putting your face in ice water. And so this is what I really want to empower people with, is because they become reliant on these practices that never actually get to the root and don't allow you to put safety back in your body. So then it's always this up and down. And there's this common misconception that, oh, being a regulated human just means that you can bring yourself back down. But what if you don't get dysregulated in the first place? What if you don't have to manage it anymore? What if, sure, these practices could be helpful, but instead of feeling good for 5 minutes, you just exist as one? And so this is where a lot of I think of the myths come in when it comes to nervous system dysregulation. Like one of the main ones being that it takes a lot of time. And this is probably one of the ones that I get the most backlash for when I talk about that it doesn't have to take a long time. And I think the reason is that when people finally realize that they've been living dysregulated and they start trying to work on their system and they're using these modalities, it's taking them a long time to heal. It's taking them a long time to regulate. And so then they get angry when I say it takes a matter of days, maybe a couple weeks, if that, because they're like, well, I've been trying to heal my nervous system for 6 months. I've been doing it for a year. It takes time. And I'm telling them, well, no, you're just not getting to the root. You're doing things like EFT tapping or dunking your face in ice water, but that's not why your brain feels unsafe. When you get to the root and you actually rewire kind of that experience, then you allow yourself to feel safe. So like one of those big myths I see is definitely that it has to take a lot of time. The second one is that it has to be hard, right? A lot of people think that it's this big, long, arduous process. And again, people have normalized it. And if you're familiar with my content, you know I'm all about not normalizing low standards, right? If you think something is going to be hard, it is naturally going to be harder. But again, people create hardness for themselves because they're not focusing and being efficient with their nervous system with what actually is going to allow it to shift. All right, so we have the myth of it taking a long time. Then we have the myth that it has to be hard. And then another big myth I see that's floating around the internet is that simply slowing down or resting heals your nervous system. And there's a big reason why this doesn't work. Because while I'm all for slow living, and you can probably speak to the fact that I live a very slow living lifestyle.
Definitely.
You call me a sloth sometimes, but I have slow mornings. Like I'm not running into work, I like my coffee. I go, for a walk. I walk our dog. We go to the gym. But if you don't have safety in your nervous system first, when you engage in slow living, you haven't actually embedded the safety for your system to relax first. So consciously, you're like, I am sitting on the couch. I am relaxing. I'm slowing down with my morning coffee. But that's all consciously what you're doing. Your unconscious, right? Your subconscious mind, which is what rules your nervous system and rules 95% of what you experience, is still playing out all of those experiences that have made you not safe. So consciously, your body, which is 5%, you're like, I am slow living. I'm doing the thing, live. I'm slowing down. But you're still existing in this dysregulated state. Because you've only addressed it consciously with the 5% and not unconsciously with that 95% that's still in your subconscious. And so while I'm all for slow living, and I'm very happy that more people are embodying this, slow living kind of lifestyle, I do see people who are engaging in slow living. They're like, I'm slowing down. And then the next day they're like, I have such severe anxiety. I had an anxiety attack. I'm like, well, this is why. Because it takes more than just slowing down. It takes embedding the safety to be able to slow down. Because what a lot of business owners don't even realize, all right, if I tell them to slow down, their system goes into fight or flight. They're like, well, if I slow down, I'm going to make less money. What do you mean slow down? I have this client thing to do. I have to grow the business. I have this. There's this laundry list of to-do lists. Maybe you also have kids. You've got a partner. You got a dog. You got a social life. You got this. You got that. You're eating healthy. You're trying to go to the gym. You're trying to do all the things. You're like, Liv, how can I slow down and make more money and do by doing less? And obviously this is what I love to work with on people. So I tell them to slow down. They're like, okay, I'm slowing down. I did it for 15 minutes. But their system was dysregulated the whole time. So it didn't really accomplish anything. This is why I always say embedding it internally first is going to be important. It's very important to address why safety is being prevented in the first place versus trying to create it by doing a meditation for 10 minutes in the morning, but then getting dysregulated the rest of the day because of how you're responding to your environment. When we have safety internally, that means that we can take it with us no matter where we go. And if there was one thing I know every single business owner, every single entrepreneur needs is safety internally. Because when you have safety inside, anything can happen in life. Anything can happen in business, and you remain calm as a cucumber. You remain chill. Because let's gonna be honest, life happens, but a dysregulated system doesn't have to. And I've been saying that for years. It's kind of one of my quotes that I say, but it's true because if we're gonna be honest, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, you know there's gonna be times where shit hits the fan. Chances are, it's normally those times where one thing hits the fan and then 3 other things hit the fan the same day. But your ability to stay calm, internally, then allows you to respond differently, right? It allows you not to go into reaction mode. It allows your brain to stay out of that fight or flight where your amygdala kicks in and you're like, oh my God, the world is ending. Because then you actually are able to access a different part of your brain. And so that safety internally means that you then don't split, right? Because when we have that lack of safety, it normally comes from things that have happened to us before, right? Things that have happened in childhood, things that have happened as we're growing up, and that only gets reinforced as we are business owners. So there tends to be multiple events, right? Whether you were judged, whether you were abandoned, whether you were neglected, whether something happened with money. And when this event happened, when this experience happened, your system got overloaded, right? Because you experienced 3 different emotions at once. So what happens is when there's an intense experience, sometimes people call it trauma. I like to call it more like tension now. You experience those 3 different emotions, and it can be any 3 emotions. It can be anger, it can be sadness, it can be frustration, it can be fear, it could be shame, it could be guilt, it could be any of these things. So 3 things, really intense, overloaded your system. Your nervous system was like, this is way too much. I cannot process all of this at one time. So what it does is it splits. Think about it like splitting it into pieces, right? All of this energy that's really big, intense experience just splits. I like to give the example, the Harry Potter example. I love Harry Potter, for those of you who know. When Voldemort splits himself into like a Horcrux into pieces, that's what happens to your nervous system. So let's say when you were younger, mom or dad wasn't around and money was tight and you witnessed a fight, right? You could be feeling fear. You could be feeling, anger. Maybe you're angry at dad for yelling at mom, or you're angry at him for not being there. And you're also really sad. That's a lot for your system to process. So it splits, right? It creates that Horcrux into 2. You then store that energy in your body for later. But what happens is that people never end up releasing that energy. And what happens from there is then that starts to build, right? So think about it like a sticky ball. You got all these split pieces where safety broke off from your nervous system, and it all starts to stack into your body and gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you get this big, dense ball of heaviness. And that's why you feel heavy, right? That's why you feel that pressure in your system. That's also what makes people anxious, what makes people stressed, why they start reacting to things that aren't really big things. If you've ever cried over spilt milk or small things happen, you're just very quick to react. You're quick to react to people. Maybe you're also getting snappy at your kids, at your partner. It starts to trickle on everywhere in your life, right? So when this splits, it creates this separation in your nervous system, right? You don't feel whole because there's this gap. There's this split that happens. So what your system is then trying to do, it's trying to search for wholeness. It's trying to search for that thing that is going to then allow that stuck energy in your system to release, to dissolve. But we're not taught how to do that in school, right? Unfortunately, but that could be a whole other episode where I talk about, let's teach children and young adults how to actually manage their nervous system. But it starts to stack as you get older and older and older. And from that split and that wholeness, you're constantly looking outside of yourself for safety, right? Think about how many times you place your safety in something or someone external to you instead of internally. And from there, you get this dysregulated state because you have all of these unprocessed emotions, all of this tension in your nervous system that is stacked up because of all of these splits, of all of those times you had an intense experience and you weren't able to fully process it in your brain. Well, the first thing, right, we need to let go of that unprocessed tension. And this is kind of what I was speaking about earlier. When you have that unprocessed tension and you're trying to do things like meditate or affirmations, putting your face in ice water, resting, slow living, you haven't changed the fact that you haven't processed those events. So what's going on in your subconscious is that it's still playing like a movie. So let's say something happened in business. Maybe a launch didn't go well, you didn't make money, or maybe you're just scared of not making money. That's playing out in your unconscious, no matter how much you rest and have a coffee or rest and have a tea. So the first thing, number 1, is you have to process those events so that energy can be released. And then you feel free, then you feel lighter. When you think about that sticky ball like I was talking about and weighing you down, you feel lighter once you've released that. You feel more clear. It doesn't feel like it's stuck in your body. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2 is you need to bring the safety back internally. And so you have to really break that cycle of looking for safety outside of you. And I know people are going to say, but Liv, I'll feel safe when I get that thing. When the money comes in, I'll be safe. When this person does this, I'll be safe. And I'll be like, no, you'll be safe for a second until the next thing happens. And then the next thing happens. Right? So it's really about changing that dynamic and bringing safety back internally so that you stop reacting to those outside things. So that no matter what happens in your life, no matter what happens in your business, you remain calm, chill, and grounded. Not outside, inside. That's step 2. The third thing, right, is really working with the unconscious mind, that subconscious, to rewire those loops, that conditioning. Because what happens is all of those experiences that you had, right, your brain starts to make sure it doesn't happen again. It is like, at all costs, I do not want this to happen again. So it's conditioned in that loop to have the same pattern. Right? This is why people get stuck in the same thing. Like, I keep attracting the same thing keeps happening to me. I'm in the same loop for maybe weeks, months, years even. But in order to break out of that loop, right, we have to work with the unconscious, which is the 95%. And this is why people can get frustrated, and where I see people really get stuck in like the personal development work for years on the same topic. If you're working on the same thing for years, we've got a problem. For months, we've got a problem. For weeks, we got to get out of that loop. But in order to get out of that loop, again, we're working with that 95%, that unconscious, subconscious part of you, which is not the conscious part who is slowing down, putting their face in ice water, doing affirmations. So what I love about the rapid rewire technique is that it works on 3 different angles of the brain all at once. And so a lot of the missing piece people have is they tend to work on the brain in one direction. So we actually have 3 different angles of the brain in terms of how the nervous system processes information, right? We have bottom up, we have top down, and then we have horizontal. So bottom up is something like somatic, right? And a lot of people do somatic work, a lot of like the trendy somatic workouts, which is great, right? It starts in your brainstem and affects how you process information through your senses. So starting at the base, that brainstem, and going up. Top down is kind of like talk therapy, right? So that really focuses on your frontal and prefrontal cortex, which is where you kind of speak, right? It's the language. It's a lot of that more 3D conscious stuff. This is why people go to talk therapy. But the reason that doesn't fully process it is that it doesn't like let it go from the body. And this is why you'll see people go to talk therapy for years for the same issue, because it'll bring it to the surface without actually rewiring the event. So you bring it to the surface, but then don't let it go, and you re-traumatize the system, and then it gets brought back down. And then we have, like I said, the horizontal direction, which if you're familiar with things like EMDR, it works horizontally across both hemispheres of the brain. So like the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere kind of go across. So what I love about what I do in my work is that we actually do all 3 directions of processing at the same time, which is where the magic is. Think about it like hitting it from all directions. 1, 2, and 3. When you do that, when you rewire it from all 3 directions, you allow your nervous system to fully process the event as a whole through all ways, versus just working on it one way or the other way and never fully integrating it from all 3 directions. And I can't tell you what a difference it makes when you process something on all 3 levels. And so this is what we're doing inside the safety program. I take you through like the 4 steps. And we were talking about earlier how people make it difficult. It's an easy, simple 4-step process to having safety in the nervous system. Number 1, right? We dissolve the fear and the anxiety that's creating that pressure in your system so that you can get deeper results in your business, right? You're no longer overthinking, feeling that overwhelm, feeling that anxiety. 2, we get you to a state where what other people say and do wash over you. So you're not living that reaction mode, right? You're not worried about what everyone else is doing or what's happening outside of you. We put that safety internally. Third thing we do is we build that trust, right? So that lack of trust that makes your system scan for danger completely dissolves so that you can exit that sympathetic state and you can exist more in a relaxed state. And from there, we expand your nervous system so that you can actually be calm and relaxed. And from there, you're able to expand at a much faster pace because you're no longer getting held back by a nervous system that feels unsafe. So we're going to leave the link for safety down below. If you guys enjoyed this episode, definitely head over to Instagram. Let me know or comment down below what your biggest takeaway was from this episode. And I will see you guys in the next one.